Let's go Mets. Let's go Mets. Let's go Mets. Yeah.
You gotta believe and invest with your heart. Orange and blue till Mets do us part. Spring training, oh yes, it's the start. City Field gritty till Mets do us part. Hit home runs and knock it out the park. Big Apple till Mets do us part. You gotta believe and invest with your heart. Listen to the show till Mets do us part. John from Brooklyn, Gibby reps NJ. With the other team, I don't care what your friends say. Mets fans, we focus like a sensei. Listen to the podcast Monday, Wednesday. Made a couple bad plays, but we still won. Character, yup, we're gonna build some. Are you gonna check the pod? It's real fun. Just like Mookie, I will, son. So invest with your heart. Orange and blue till Mets do us part. Spring training, oh yes, it's the start. City Field gritty till Mets do us part. Hit home runs and knock it out the park. Big Apple till Mets do us part. You gotta believe and invest with your heart. Listen to the show.
Available now on all streaming platforms. If you love the New York Mets, check out Till Mets Do Us Part. Enough rapping. Let's get to yapping.
Yo, what's going on, everybody? Welcome into another episode of Till Mets Do Us Part. We're live on YouTube, live on Twitter, like we are each and every single week, back in our regularly scheduled time slot on our regularly scheduled day, Wednesdays, 5:30 p.m. Eastern Time. Happy New Year to everybody. The first episode of 2025 here with Till Mets Do Us Part, all courtesy of the Brella Sports Network. Shout out to John Manconi, John Saponaro out in Burbank, California. And that means my co-host, Matt Ibanez, holding things down back in New Jersey. Ibby, Happy New Year to you. And another year of New York Mets baseball, another year of you and I talking about our Mets here on Till Mets Do Us Part.
The time is flying by, John. What are we? This is season 4 for us, season 5. I've lost count at this point. But either way, it's fantastic. Another year here. January 8th, I think we are past, according to Larry David, for all my Curb Your Enthusiasm fans out there. I believe January 7th is the last day that you can say Happy New Year, according to the great Larry David. But we haven't seen you since. So again, Happy New Year to everyone. Hopefully you had a great start to the new year, and hopefully things continue for you moving forward. But yes, it is yet another year here. We're going to be talking Mets baseball all year long, and there's still a lot to go over, and it's begun to be very, very cold. It's cold in Jersey. The stove itself is ice cold right now. But based off of the way that I wrote the title this week, and according to Jeff Passan, the Mets are silent, but they are still very active. And to quote Jeff Passan, he said that the Winter of Soto is still cooking. So there are things going on behind the scenes, but as we've learned to figure out with the David Stearns-led Mets, as well as Steve Cohen, this team operates in silence. So hopefully some news can break maybe during the show or within the next week as we progress, as we're 6 weeks out, I believe, from pitchers and catchers. So, at that point, hopefully we can get some resolution when it comes to some of these bigger names. But other than that, I'm doing well. The better question is, how are you doing, my friend?
To quote another great show, to quote Mad Men, not great, Bob. Things are not going so great out here in California right now. Fortunately, we have been mostly unscathed from the crazy wildfires that have been plaguing Southern California and the LA area. But the Santa Ana winds are crazy. We were not unscathed from that. Last night, scary moment. The tree in front of our apartment building was ripped out. Not even uprooted. It snapped at the base. And you're talking about, like, I don't know how old this tree was, but it was old. It was thick. It was taller than the apartment building. Yeah. And it landed on our apartment building. And then about an hour and a half or so later, we lost power for 7 hours. Fortunately, the response has been tremendous, as good as it can be. We regained power in the middle of the night. Crews were out here at around 10:30 or 11 o'clock working to try to get power back restored for us. So obviously I have power. We're here. We're doing the show. So shout out to them for doing that. And then as of 7 a.m. this morning, they were destroying, what was left of that tree, cutting it down so they could remove it from the side of the building. So those two issues very much resolved. We are located just outside of any evacuation zones as far as the fires are concerned. But it's something that you have to keep monitoring because these fires are really intense. The containment is 0% in some ways, which is not good. So we don't think we're going to have to leave. The warnings and stuff are supposed to simmer down by late afternoon, early evening into tonight, and hopefully that'll mean that we're out of the woods as far as having to evacuate. But scary times. I know some people who have already had to evacuate. Obviously, if you've been on social media at all, which everybody is, you're seeing some of the images, and it's horrific. The air quality is terrible right now. Windows closed, kind of mask mandates, not mandates, but mask, highly recommended if you go outside, just because of how bad it's been. And unrelated to all of that, I found out this morning that I have shingles, so I'm in a little bit of pain, and it's been a weird couple of days to start 2025. Apart from that, everything was great, but the last couple of days have been tricky, to say the least.
Yeah, I mean, I'm glad that you're in an area that is, at the moment, at least, you are in a safe spot. And I saw those pictures last night that you showed of that tree, and hopefully, now that that's all taken care of, hopefully you're, no pun here, but like out of the woods, if you will, in terms of, everything that's going on. It's just insanity. Like you were explaining to me some stuff off air, because I don't really know much about what goes on in California and these 90-mile-an-hour winds. I'm like, this is insane. I've never heard of anything like that. So outside of like a hurricane and stuff like that. So I'm glad that you and yours are doing well and nothing, actually happened to the point where you were hurt or anything. So that's good.
Yeah, no, thank you. And I see all the comments. Shout out to everybody in the comments, by the way. We'll start talking Mets here for in a moment, but shout out to everybody with the well wishes, and Keith saying shingles. How old are you, John? And then D saying people in their 30s can get shingles. Apparently you can. So I am firmly in my 30s, and I got shingles, and it's not great, but I guess compared to how it can be, I've heard some really horrible stories of people dealing with some very intense versions of this, and it's not great, but it's not like, oh my God, this is the worst I've ever experienced. So anyway, enough about me. Hopefully we'll be able to, do the show and the crew out here, in Los Angeles. Shout out to the fire department, not only in LA County, but Burbank County, Pasadena, people working, literally around the clock to try to get these fires in order. There's, businesses are really stepping up, doing their thing, providing food, providing shelter. There's a number to call for folks who are displaced where they can stay in an Airbnb for free for up to a week. Because people are, entire communities have been torched, and it's awful. It's awful. But got to address that stuff because it's real life and it's happening. Course, and it's happening outside my window. But we'll talk about Mets, which everybody is here for, to answer D's question. Southern California here in LA. So it's crazy out here right now. It's a weird time of the year to have this show sometimes, because January can be filled with a lot of flurry of activity as far as the hot stove is concerned. And it can be filled with a lot of inactivity. And we've certainly seen a little bit of both. I mean, it's frustrating. I think it's becoming tiresome. You use the word when talking to me about the Pete Alonso fatigue. That's what's in the crawl underneath, of our faces. I know you put out a poll about Pete Alonso fatigue. And look, last week, Shay, who's a big commenter and viewer of the show, asked if Pete Alonso was holding up the Mets offseason. And I said, no, I think he's just holding it up for fans, because fans want to see activity. Fans want to know what their team is going to look like. But you got to kind of be patient and let the process play out. But Ibby, at this point, I can't blame anybody for having Pete Alonso fatigue. I don't blame Pete for trying to get as much money as he can and, maximize his earning potential and stuff. I'm always on the side of the players when it comes to stuff like that, because their window to do that is finite. And this is Pete Alonso's window right here, right now. But I can't get on anybody for saying that they're tired of this process, because I think people want to start looking forward to spring training. They want to start looking forward to pitchers and catchers. Mets fans in particular, we got Juan Soto, and we want to try to build off of an NLCS trip last year. And every Mets fan, whether you're somebody who follows super intently, whether you're somebody who just kind of hangs in the background, every Mets fan is like, they're aware that our team is incomplete. And I think they're waiting for the Pete Alonso shoe to drop so that other moves can happen. The positive is, like we talked about last week, the Mets were in on Teoscar Hernandez. And that shows you that they're not just going to wait and sit on their hands for Pete Alonso to decide. They're going to continue to make other moves. They're going to continue to have their eyes, down the road, so to speak. So that is the positive. But for everybody, and we always preach patience on this show, and I will continue to try to do that. All I'm going to say is, if you are wearing thin on patience with regards to the Pete Alonso process, I understand. I do.
And I'm going to shout out everyone. Obviously, thank you for joining us this week. We've got 187 in the room so far. On the YouTube side, we got 74 people, 18 likes. Make sure you hit the like on the video. It helps with the algorithm. But we have 33 votes so far on the question that simply is asking, have you grown tired of Pete Alonso talk? 85% say yes, just sign already, while 15% say no, pay the man his worth. And I have grown, I have no problem talking about Pete Alonso and all that goes on with the offseason, but when it comes to this one, because we've been talking about it for a long time at this point now, because we've all been curious about him being a free agent and being a Boras client and turning down the extension that he did, which, yes, it was 150 and change, but when you account for the year of arbitration being bought out, it's like about 130-ish. Has he lost and fumbled that bag, if you will, because he decided to drop agency and then pick up Boras and think, I'm going to do better? He bet on himself. It didn't work out. Not everybody is Aaron Judge. I forgot who said it, but I don't think
it went just about as badly as it possibly can go for a long time.
It could. And then when you look at his overall numbers and how they have dropped from year to year, there's a difference between that rookie year and how it's gone down ever since. And people question his overall WAR and everything. But I don't think it ever really helped Pete Alonso either when, he was being equated to that of an Aaron Judge because he's a New York guy and he hits the home runs, and the amount of home runs that he has hit in X amount of years in comparison to Judge and things like, I don't think that helped him either. I don't think that type of unwanted pressure was needed for him, and it didn't work out. So all of this talk, and then when you mix in, and people in the chat are talking about it already, when you mix in the Scott Boras factor, where yes, Scott Boras has been very successful. He's one of the most, if not the most successful agents of all time. He gets superstars paid. He got the largest contract in North American sports for Juan Soto with our New York Mets, and we are all ecstatic about that. But it's one thing that you can question over the last handful of years, that non-superstar, and when I mean Pete in his own right is a New York superstar, I think, at least. But in terms of overall baseball, is he the level of a Juan Soto? No, he's not. Is he the level of an Aaron Judge? No, he is not. Mookie Betts, so on and so forth. He's not at that level. So players like that, like we saw last year as well. You look at the Matt Chapmans, you look at what happened to Blake Snell last year, you look at what happened to Jordan Montgomery, and the time that they had to wait and what had happened. Now, I have to give Boras flowers at the same time, because the game he played, he ended up getting great money from a great team in the Dodgers for Blake Snell the following year. Yep. He ended up getting that extension and that big contract that Matt Chapman was looking for. So he got his money. So there's still a way that this can work out for him. But when it comes to our New York Mets, I do not see them budging. I can't remember who said it, but they had said that when it comes to Boras and how he pushes people, when you have someone like David Stearns who has a slower heartbeat in comparison to others, and him knowing also that he has the money behind him, that with Cohen, he doesn't have to budge. There's no reason to budge. And I know Carson over at Mets Weekly put out a video the other day talking about the final offer that he would give to Pete Alonso of like 100 and I want to say it was like 106 million.
Yeah, it was a play on the 3 years, 90 million deal. And I think there was like a fourth year with an option that the Mets control, while Pete had opt-outs that he could control in the first 2 years. It was it was taking that 3 years, 90 million contract adding a year to it that the Mets control on an option, or that Pete can get to with a certain, number of blank, and giving Pete opt-outs. That gave the Mets a little bit more security, gave Pete the ability to opt out. Again, that was just one person's opinion. That was just Carson's idea, not a deal that has been floated out. But I think that's the kind of thing, creativity-wise, Ibby, that we're going to probably need to see to get this deal done. I think the Mets are going to have to give a little, and I think Pete's going to have to give a little to make this thing happen. And sorry for the interruption, but I think that that's what's going to happen. I think both sides are going to have to relinquish a little bit if they get this done, because I think Pete wants to save face now. I think he's going to have to do a little bit.
I have to bring something up real quick because I'm going to keep laughing if I don't. We got Paul Revere back in the comments saying, sign Santander, Pete, 390 or walk. And then the follow-up from Paul Revere's horse. I agree with Paul. So I had to throw that in there because it made me laugh, because we talked about that last time he was on the show. But no, I think that there's no reason. And I thought Carson's creativity with that offer was proper, and I understood it. But he said it in his caption underneath the photo for the thumbnail. And it was, this is too generous, or is this, basically saying like, what I'm saying is beyond generous to this point because of how the market has fallen. Look, is there still an opportunity for someone as crazy as Armand will bring up, I'm sure, the Angels stepping in and being like, hey, we'll take Pete Alonso. We'll give up the pick because we have the number 2 pick, so we don't care if we lose the 47th pick. We want a star. We want to help Mike Trout. We got Jorge Soler. We got these new guys. We're trying to rebuild and do something on the fly. Could they do something? Sure. But to this point, nothing has happened. So there's no reason for the Mets to budge. There's no reason for the Mets to come off and say, look, Pete, we offered you $30 million a year for 3 years. We'll give you the opt-outs as well. If you want that type of pillow contract where you can do what you got to do, succeed this year with Juan Soto in the lineup, and then you want to go out again next year, we'll give you that option. That's there for you. And that's something that I had said weeks ago that I didn't think the Mets wanted to do because they didn't want to play this game again. But with how things are going and how I think, someone like Vlad Guerrero is not going to extend and stay, he's going to test free agency instead of staying in Toronto, then if they want, and Pete says it, I'll take the opt-out deal, then I think the Mets are more willing to do that now, because they'll say, look, we're not going to do this whole song and dance with you again. You come with us back for the year, you do what you do, and then we're going to attack Vlad Guerrero and then not deal with Boras, and we'll give that guy money, and we'll take the 26, 27-year-old as opposed to the 30, 31-year-old. So it's beyond taxing as a fan, because we want so much for this lineup to be a lot more complete. And we as Mets fans are not stupid. We know Mets fans are smart, and Mets fans remember that Juan Soto presser where he said, look, I'm playing with probably the best leadoff hitter in the game, and I think we can do more within the rest of this lineup. That's Mets fans hear that and they say, we need more offense. We've been saying that we need more. Yes, Juan Soto right now at the moment has replaced Pete Alonso in terms of production from an offensive standpoint in comparison to last year. Would we as fans, and do we think the team in general would be better if you also add back Pete Alonso? Yes, that'd be fantastic. It makes the lineup deeper, more power, more opportunity to score runs for a pitching staff that we think could be a little bit up and down, but you got to score runs for them so they can succeed. So Mets fans aren't dumb. They know that we need more. Bring it back to what you just said before, that it feels incomplete because it is. But like I said before, Jeff Passan noted it, and we've said it on the show before as well. There's still a lot to be done because they have too many holes still. People are going to get signed. It's just dragging along because when you have an agent like Scott Boras involved with a lot of these people, he drags everything out to try to get as much money as he can. But eventually, he runs out of time, and he has to end up settling.
There's a lot of great comments coming in. I'll try to get to as many as I can. Jeff Cohen saying, please just tell us when Pete signs already. He's not going to San Francisco or Seattle. Those teams know that his power does not play well in those stadiums. I think that's a valid point. I think when Pete's at his best, his power plays anywhere. But I think coming off of 2 down years, there's concern whether or not his best is behind him.
Right.
And his power will play. Andrew saying, I'm starting to think Stearns and the Mets are done with big contracts, especially if they can't get Pete. I don't think so. I think that the Mets are still going to sign some big deals. I just think that their team is too incomplete to not. That's just my opinion. I know, Ibby, you share the thought as far as that is concerned. I don't have any knowledge to back that up, but I just feel as though they're not going to just roll with this youth movement. I don't think that is a recipe for success, despite the fact that, like I always say on this show, baseball is better with young, athletic, versatile players. I think that is true, but you have to have young, athletic, versatile players that are good at baseball. And when you sit there and you say, don't pay Pete, just put Vientos at first base, well, that's not a given, because you don't know how he's going to react to a position change in what is really only his second year. Oh, now you have to replace Pete. Okay, now your third baseman is going to be Brett Beatty. Well, Brett Beatty to this point has been a 4A player, quadruple A player. So that's not going to get it done. I love Mauricio's upside. So you say, let Mauricio battle it out with Beatty for third base. There were questions and arguments whether or not Mauricio could play third base going back to when he was healthy. So I think you have to not forget about that, even though I thought he would win the third base job if he was healthy. But Ibby, he wasn't healthy for an entire year. He had 2 surgeries on his knees. He only just started getting cleared for baseball activities. So that's not none of these players outside of having Vientos in the lineup are a youth movement you can bank on. Moving Vientos is not something I would bank on to a different position. Beatty, certainly not. Mauricio, you just can't. Jet Williams, he was hurt. He's never played in the majors. Drew Gilbert, he was hurt. He's never played in the majors. Ryan Clifford, he's too far away at this point. Luis Angel Acuna, I think he showed some real promise. He might be a bright lights guy, despite the fact that he wasn't a great prospect, wasn't a great hitting prospect. Maybe he's a guy who turns it on. He'll never be his brother, but maybe he's a guy who is a very serviceable piece. But you know what? We saw 2 weeks of him. That is not what a youth movement is, guys. That is not what a team that is trying to capitalize and build off of winning, getting to the NLCS. That is not what a team in that position does. I'm not saying these guys are irrelevant. I'm not saying these guys don't matter. I'm not saying you trade them for nothing or you get big contracts everywhere and you bog down your payroll. I'm not saying that. I'm saying that a team who has superstars in their 30s, like Lindor, stars in their 30s, like Nimmo, players like Senga, players like Diaz, who just went out and signed Juan Soto to the biggest contract in North American sports history, who just came off of a surprising run to the NLCS. They don't say, you know what? That's good. Let's put Luis Angel Acuna in the lineup. Let's also put Jeff McNeil out there, who hasn't really been good in like 4 years. Let's take Starling Marte, who hasn't been healthy since the first year we got him. Let's put him out there. That's not a recipe for success, Ibby. And anybody who thinks it is wrong. They're just wrong. And I said it last week. I will say it again. The odds of these players, these prospects panning out is like less than 5%. And when you start to say, well, Vientos worked out, if you believe that Alvarez worked out, that actually lowers the chances that these other guys are going to work out because they're all contemporaries. And so the concept that these players are going to be all players that you can bank on to play major roles, and you say, forget Alonso and his 35, even if it's just 35. Forget Alonso and his 35 home runs. Give me Brett Beatty. Why? Why would you do that? Are you trying to win baseball games? Or are you trying to prove a point that you're super smart? Because it's not going to work out.
Yeah, I think the big thing that a lot of people are doing is the comping of the kids to the ones that you just said have had some success, that being Alvarez and Vientos. And yes, I have defended Brett Beatty on this show, but I've also said that I don't think that the Brett Beatty success is going to come in New York. I thought he would succeed elsewhere. And that's where I still am on that side of the fence in terms of, I don't know if it's going to happen here, because we've seen a lot more from him than we did from Vientos. We saw Vientos in spurts and he succeeded in those spurts. And we're like, well, why don't we give this kid more of a chance? And eventually they did. And he took the ball and he fucking ran with it. Mm-hmm. Whereas we've seen Brett Beatty. He's got over 600 plate appearances now, and it hasn't really looked good at all. So I said to you yesterday that I felt that, this entire thing when it comes to the kids is just more so of a way of, posturing and just saying, it's a potential fallback or what have you. when it comes to trade talks and things, or I'm sorry, when it comes to contract talks and things like that, like, hey, we're going to pay you this, and if you're not going to take it, look, we're ready to pivot and just play the kids and go that route instead. So it's something that I can't subscribe to it, and I can't subscribe to it because I still think that there's enough question within the lineup still when it comes to the limited spots that we said will allow kids to try and thrive. And we mentioned 2 spots in particular. We said 1 spot in the outfield, be that center or left, depending on Nimmo's health. And we said second base. Now, if you're going to start bringing in third base, now we're talking about 3 positions where we have no idea what's going to be happening from an offensive perspective, from a defensive perspective. Like, we don't know what's and then throwing first base if you're moving Vientos from third to first. Like, you're putting way too many question marks.
I think that's a great point, because I think ultimately that's the point I'm trying to make. Let's say the only position of need, let's just look at the Mets. It doesn't matter who's in certain spots. Alonso's under contract, whatever. Let's just say the position of question for the Mets was second base. And you're like, wow, we could trade Jeff McNeil right now. Even if we eat some of the money, we put Luis Angel Acuna there, we see what he's got, but everything else is set. We know we're going to get 30 home runs out of first base. We know we're going to get 30 out of third base. We know what Lindor is. We're banking on a big bounce back year from Alvarez, because even in a down year, he showed some really good things, sophomore slump, whatever. We've got Juan Soto now. We got Brandon Nimmo. He had a down year, but okay, we've got the makings of a team. But second base is the thing we're going to coin flip on, and we're going to go with Acuna. And you wanted to do that, and that was your thought as a youth movement was, okay, Acuna, Alvarez, Vientos. I'll go with that, because 2 of those guys have proven something, and one guy was a great spark plug in the little chance that he had. But to say, okay, well, Alvarez, he's got to rebound at catcher, and Vientos, he's got to do it all again, but he has to do it as a first baseman. And then Beatty or Mauricio, they've got to do it at third, and then Acuna could do it at second, but he has to if Jeff McNeil fails. And then what do we do in the outfield if Starling Marte can't play? Like, do you realize now this team has 8 holes? You can't do that. You simply cannot. So that's my point. I think it's a really astute observation from you. It's just like you're opening up too many holes, or at the very least too many question marks.
Yeah, and I don't think that that's ultimately where this team is going to go, because look, I've also said before that I understand David Stearns when he says you have to allow kids to learn on the fly and fall down so they can get back up, so they can become things. I get that. But at the same time, you have to know what, certain guys I get it for, but I don't think right now I can buy it for a Brett Beatty. I can't. And furthering the point of just saying, I'm just going to put, Mark Vientos at first base. We saw what Vientos was at third. The limited time he has had at various levels at first has not been pretty. We've seen Brett Beatty play third base, and one could say, yeah, well, Brett Beatty's better than Vientos at third. It's like, yeah, but that's not saying much, because Beatty wasn't some world beater when he was playing third base from a defensive standpoint either. It's very anti David Stearns. It doesn't make sense.
Look, I know this is a generation ago, and not all players are the same, and players are maybe a bit more versatile. And Vientos is a younger player than the player I'm going to bring up was when they tried to make a switch. But I don't know. I don't always buy the thing of this position is easier. It is if you're a great defensive player. First base is easier than third base. But you look at Mike Piazza, who his biggest issue as a catcher was his arm. Everything else he did, even by metrics that weren't measured at the time, that got measured after his career was basically over, he was a good defensive catcher. He just couldn't throw the ball.
No arm.
And in a year, in an era where the best defensive catchers had great arms, like Pudge Rodriguez, and that was really the only metric to say whether a guy was a good defender at the position, it was easy to be like, this guy's not that good. He's not that good. But he should have theoretically, even though he was older, be able to move to first base and play it better because it's easier than catcher. but he couldn't do it. Not everybody is Craig Biggio that can move 4 positions in one career, or Todd Zeal or Joe Torre. It can move around the diamond like that. So look, again, is Vientos younger than Piazza when he tried to do that? Yes. Is that a generation ago example that may be a flawed example as trying to make a 1-for-1 or an apples to apples comparison? Sure. I just don't necessarily buy that, like, oh, okay, he's a better third baseman than we thought he was going to be, albeit still one with a lot of faults. Let's move him to first. He'll be great there. I don't know that that's true. What proof do you have of that? Oh, and by the way, his best asset is his arm, and then you lose a lot of that by playing him at first.
I also think people just often are lazy and they think that, oh, like when we play softball, when we play whatever, we pick up baseball. It's like, anyone can play first base. So yeah, he can go over there. He can do the job. It's like, no, there's a lot more to it than what you think it is. So I think it's just being said as a potential, but I really think that when push comes to shove, and we bring this all back to where we started, when push comes to shove, I really believe that, the Mets and Pete will figure something out, because I don't think there's anyone else. And I'm going to bring up Ant's comment right here. Somebody to say, Alonso has no leverage, but the Mets also don't, because the first base options are dry. Going to have to go to the outfield market if they don't bring in Pete, that being a Santander or even a Profar. And we'll talk about those guys because I have some thoughts on them as well. Mm-hmm. That's why I put them in the thumbnail this week. But we're getting to a point where I don't see the Giants. I don't buy, as crazy as the Angels are, I don't buy the Angels. And I also don't buy the insanity that people have brought up as the idea of Toronto signing Pete Alonso as a preemptive. I don't buy that either. No. Because if that was the case, you would already be hearing about them being open to trading Vladimir Guerrero before the arbitration deadline. So that hasn't happened. So I don't buy that either. So it all comes back to where we all assumed it was going to end up, and that being Pete remaining with the team. I still think the Mets are in the driver's seat regardless of what is out there and how things are going, because there is no other dance partner for him. Boras can want Prince Fielder money all he wants. 9 years, $214 million. Hey, if you want to use that as your barometer, guess what? You're not going to get the 9 years. We'll give you 3 years at the same AAV that you're talking about there. So we'll give you 3 years at $71 million. How about
you know what I don't understand about that? And I know this has been said on Twitter because that news came out a few days ago. So this has been walked over a bunch. But Ibby, Prince Fielder, when he signed that contract, first of all, that contract was signed 12 years ago, which in terms of baseball contracts might as well be 100 years ago. But when Prince signed that contract, he was younger than Pete is now.
Yes.
He was a better player than Pete is right now.
Yes.
Better all-around hitter than Pete. And then he signed that contract and unfortunately was only healthy for about 3.5 years of it. And then he had to fucking retire. Yeah. I don't understand in your right mind why you would be using that contract as a barometer for a contract now. The player was younger. The player was better. It was over a decade ago, and it was one of the worst contracts ever signed in terms of productivity that was then put out on the field. And the only reason why it fully didn't blow up is because he had no choice but to retire. So it's not like it left the team, holding the bag for the entire time. I don't remember if they worked out a deal or whatever, but if you retire, you forfeit the contract. In simplest terms, you retire, you're no longer tied to the contract. The team doesn't have to pay you. Most of the time, if it's due to injury, some kind of compensation is worked out. But we've seen it, Ibby, with the Nationals and Steven Strasburg. That's not always a cut and dried situation. It's not always easy to come to a conclusion that allows you to work out compensation for that deal. So to me, that was just the most asinine thing that's ever been brought up. And if Boras is truly using that as a barometer, that is an insane barometer to use.
And one other comment I'll bring up from Ant as well, saying how the Cubs have always been linked to Alonso and bring them back in 23. Yes, they have, but I won't include them mainly because their focus should be doing whatever they can to try and keep Kyle Tucker now that they have him. And the fact that they are trading away players at the same time while also adding players. So, adding a Tucker, but then dumping a Bellinger, it just feels like they're trying to play this game of balancing money that I don't know if they will go the lengths that they have to. I mean, I guess the only thing would be if Pete got so fed up that at the quote unquote disrespect that some people think that the Mets are giving him. I guess the only thing would be, would he take a Bellinger-esque contract from someone else to play the 1 year instead of going back to the Mets, which again,
you brought that up early. You brought that up like 6 months ago.
Yeah.
Yeah, go ahead.
No, but like the main thing there is just like, it doesn't make sense to me, because why would he do that now when the Mets have Juan Soto in their lineup? Like, if you're going to succeed, you might as well do it here where there's less pressure on you now, because there's another superstar here making a boatload of money that allows you to just be what you are. And that's Pete Alonso, the power hitter.
That's true. Because I remember 6 months ago or thereabouts, when I was floating out the idea of a shorter term deal for Pete, allow him to test the waters. This was in the midst of like, the lowest point of Pete's lowest season. And Ibby, you had said to me, like, I don't know if he's going to take that deal from the Mets. Maybe he goes and takes that deal from another team where he can go and reestablish his value, knowing that he already turned down this 7-year extension from the Mets. It might close the door. And at the time, shout out to you, because that was an astute observation. Now, again, because all of this stuff doesn't exist in a vacuum, it is fluid, it is living, it is up on its feet. Pete Alonso's suitors have gone away because all of these teams have acquired, signed, traded for whatever first baseman. And you look at it, the Mets signed Juan Soto. If you're Pete Alonso, why would you not take a shorter term deal, even if you have a little bit of egg on your face, to go back to a team where you're comfortable, where you're familiar, where you are well liked in the fan base? And I know some people are upset about this situation, but bear with me. Overall, you're a liked player. You just had a signature playoff moment. And now you go back to an offense that has a fully functional Lindor who is firing on all cylinders, especially for the past 2-3 years. You add Juan Soto to the mix. You have a Vientos who is emerging. You have Nimmo, I know, a down year, but you have all these different kinds of players that allow Alonso to just be a guy who hits fourth and hits home runs. It doesn't matter to me. I mean, he can go back to hitting 220, 230 and hit 40 to 50 home runs, because he doesn't have to try to be an average guy. He doesn't have to try to do something else. He can just do what he does and what he does best. So you're right. Like, you were right then that was, I don't know if he would really do that. And you're right now by saying, look, not only have the options dried up, but wouldn't you want to hit in a lineup with Lindor and Soto? You're going to go to the Cubs instead? You're going to go, like, look, I know the Cubs have some hitters. Like, Kyle Tucker's very, very, very good. He's great. But you're going to go to the Cubs, you're going to hit with Kyle Tucker, or you want to hit with Lindor, Soto, and Vientos? You're going to go to the Giants, and you're going to try to succeed there on one season and bank on your future on being able to do it, hitting alongside of Willie Adames? Or are you going to do it here with Lindor and Soto? What's wrong with you? Do the math, bro.
Again, that I guess what everything that you're saying right now kind of equates back to what everyone thinks the prototypical Scott Boras client is. And they're just, where's the money? Like, I'm going where the money is. Like, and that maybe that's eventually what is going to happen for Pete Alonso. Maybe that's what he wanted the entire time. I don't know. I laughed at Keith's comment before, saying how, saying to me that that's implying here it is. Ibby, you are implying that Pete Alonso was smart at business. And this entire situation kind of, like, we always joke about how Pete is like, he's goofy, he's kind of dorky, but he's our dork or whatever. And like it's kind of like the Eli Manning type of thing. We've said that before, of type of personality. And it's like the entire time this is going on, I'm picturing that person, Pete Alonso, like of what he is, like what we've grown to love him to be as ours. And I'm picturing that guy as the one that's like in these meetings. I know he's not, and it's not him who's running these things. It's Scott Boras, but how everything has gone, like it kind of comes across like a goofball is in there, because like you had 157, You said no. You picked up Boras. The entire market turns against you. They don't want you. Every single team needs a first baseman. They go somewhere else. They trade. They sign someone for cheaper. They take someone who's older. Like all these different things. It's like, hey, man, we're still here. We gave you 90. We're offering you $90 million for 3 years. And if you want more, you can leave after next year. It's right here for you. You've been here. We got Soto. We got the vibes. Let's do this. And it's still holding out. Carlos in the comments is saying that Heyman reported that he wants 6 years. Hey, buddy, you had your shot at that. It's no longer there. No one's going to give it to you.
Yeah. Shout out to everybody in the comments, by the way. If you're watching live and you're live for the first time with us, welcome to the show. I see some new commenters. I see some old familiar friends in the comments as well. I think we've got some new subscribers because you can't comment unless you subscribe. So I know that
12 away from 1,200.
12 away from 1,200, growing all the time. This is Til Mets Do Us Part, live on YouTube, live on Twitter, like we are each and every single week, Wednesday at 5:30 p.m. Eastern. That is 2:30 p.m. out here on the West Coast where I reside. Shout out to Brella Sports Network for making this all possible. I'm happy that you brought up this comment from Carlos because earlier he said, the Mets don't need to give anything in terms of giving room on the contract because the Mets don't need Alonso. Alonso needs the Mets. And I think these are two.
It's always been the point. Yeah.
I think these are two good comments from Carlos. I'll disagree and I'll agree with both. I think Alonso needs the Mets more for everything that I just said and everything that we've been saying for 40 minutes. But I do think the Mets need a first baseman. They may not need Alonso, but with things drying up a bit, they need to go in some direction to fill those holes that we've been talking about. And there are other options. You could go the Bregman route. You can go the Santander route. You can go the Profar route. We could talk about those guys coming up in a little bit. But the Mets do have a need here. I think Alonso needs the Mets more, but the Mets certainly do have a need. And the reason why I said earlier, which was the catalyst for this comment, the Mets might need to give a little bit, is sometimes you just have to give a little bit just to get the thing done. It's what we talked about last week, whether or not that 3 years, $90 million contract was something that is true. People in our comments last week said, why would the Mets up the AAV nearly $8 million? And it's like, well, they would up the AAV $8 million to throw Pete a bone. It's a life raft. They're saying, dude, you turned down 22.5 over 7 years. To Carlos's point, you're not making that back up. You're not getting the 6 years back because the 7 years did include the year that just wrapped up. So you're not getting a 6-year deal now. But what we will do is, if you want, we're not going to make you look bad. You're our guy. You want to be the highest paid first baseman in baseball? We'll make you the highest paid first baseman in baseball in AAV, not in total length of contract. And I still think that if this does come together, you're going to see some kind of give and take from the Mets, even though, to Carlos's point, he doesn't think the Mets need to give something. I think Alonso's need to give something up is greater. I think Alonso's need for the Mets is greater. But I think in order to get this deal done, ultimately, you have to acknowledge, just to be fair, the Mets need a first baseman of some kind, and the Mets will need to give up something, whether it be an opt-out or two or whatever, to Alonso to make this happen. I think without that, I still think he comes back to the Mets because it's just the musical chairs game is nearly full. But without the Mets giving a little bit to let him save face, I don't see how he accepts a deal.
I think the saving face would be an extra 10 million. And when I mean 10 million, I mean not like 3 years, 90. He'll say, give me 100 million.
3 years, 100.
I think he says 3 years, 100, and let's go. Or he might say, give me, let's try to shoot for one more year and let's make it $110. And
right.
let's call it that. And I'm ready to go. It could be that, or it could be the Mets then saying, look, we'll give you the 3 years at 100 and we'll give you the opt out after year one also. And he might say, okay, maybe I'll do that. Like, so there are ways that you could do this. I agree with Carlos to the point where it's like, I too believe that they don't have to budge, but if you want to just close a deal and just be done with it, what's an extra $10 million? Like I just said,
Sure.
like I think that's doable, but then it also comes back to, is Boras willing to do that? But again, it comes down to the client, what the client wants. If that's what Pete says, yes, I'll do this, that changes the story. But will that happen? We'll find out.
I'll jump back into the comments here because there's a lot of good ones from a lot of different points in the conversation. So I'll try to get to the most relevant ones first. Actually, I'm going to break my own rule just because, not because this person agreed with me, but because I love the handle and I think they're new to the show. Silly Mazzilli 86 says spot on about the fielder contract. Welcome to the show.
Welcome,
Silly
Silly.
Mazzilli. Thank you for agreeing with me,
Silly.
but really I just brought it up because Silly Mazzilli is a fantastic handle.
Welcome.
There's a band called the Tony Danza Tap Dance Extravaganza, and that's what this feels like to me. That's just
really good.
Fantastic. John Arias saying, I'm okay with leaving center field and second base open for the prospects, but I agree we can't have this many question marks. Going back to what we were saying before. Yeah. Right now, if the Mets signed Pete and just Pete right now, any contract, 3 years, 90, 4 years, 110, whatever, they signed him right now, they would still have question marks at second base because McNeil, who knows what he is, Acuna, who knows what he is. Center field, you're going to get great defense out of Tyrone Taylor and Jose Siri, but who knows what kind of offense you're going to get. Now, I think that combination of guys should be better than the combination of guys playing center field last year, which, by the way, Bader and Taylor did a good job offensively, but I think it's more complimentary to have a player like Jose Siri who sells out big time for power and RBI in big spots. He's going to strike out a lot, but he's going to give you more power. And then Taylor can give you a more consistent at bat. I think that will be better, but that is question marks. And then the DH portion is a question mark too, because you have the ghost of Starling Marte out there. So that's already, it's these two holes, or not two holes, but these two question marks plus DH. And that's if they signed Pete. That's with them signing Pete right now. So the concept of opening up more question marks, to me, doesn't really make sense. I'm going to bring up these two comments from Carlos. One he said earlier, one he reiterated when we were reacting to one of his other comments. He said, we don't have to consider Beatty for third base. Santander is available for first. Winker is available for first DH. We could sign Santander and Winker, and the lineup is already better than last year's. And then kind of said something similar, which is why he's saying they don't need Pete. Ibby, I agree with Carlos here. Now, look, Winker has not played a ton of first base. Santander, I think, played first base for like 11 games or 13 years as a pro. 11 games or 13 games as a pro, something like that. Not a lot. Neither guy is a first baseman. But I did float out in our group chat earlier in the week. I said, you know what? It's getting to the point with me where I like Santander as a hitter anyway. I like Santander as a guy who would be your sometimes DH, sometimes left fielder that would allow Nimmo to be off of his feet in the outfield a little bit more. Even though Santander is not a great outfielder, you need somebody who could spell Nimmo so that Nimmo stays fresher and Nimmo stays healthier. So I like Santander on this team anyway. If I were David Stearns, and I don't know if Santander is willing to accept this. I know at one point he wanted a 5-year deal. Tough titties. That's not happening. I would offer Santander a 3-year deal and see if he accepts it. The 3 years that they weren't willing to go to for Teoscar and the 3 years that they are willing to go to for Pete, I would offer it to Santander. And if he signs, I would put out to the media, he's going to play some first base. And then I would see if that pushes Alonso, because I think you could have both of those guys in the lineup anyway. And I do think that while he hasn't played there a ton, Santander could potentially maybe be an option at first base because it's not like he's never done it. And I think that maybe you can get both guys because you force Pete's hand a little bit. Now, look, I know a lot of things have to go right to make that happen, but I don't know. That's kind of where I'm starting to lean in this. So, Carlos, I do kind of agree with you because I just think, Ibby, if the Mets were in on Teoscar Hernandez, that means that they are actively looking for a outfielder / DH. Well, Santander is an outfielder / DH. He's got a little bit of experience at first And maybe if you get him, you've already lengthened the lineup, and maybe you put a little bit of pressure on Pete. And then if Pete doesn't sign here, maybe you actually do see if Santander can play first base. I don't know. I don't know if that would work, but to me, that feels like something that could be attainable.
I definitely think that if the Mets right now said to Santander, like, hey, we're going to offer you the same exact offer we offered Pete, 3 years, $90 million, I think he'd be signed today. I really do. I think
what would you sign Santander for? Like, let's say it's a 3. So let's say he wanted 5. He probably won't get it. Teoscar, similar player. He took 2 to go back to, or to 3 to go back to the Dodgers, right?
3 that could turn into 4 to go back to the Dodgers.
Okay. So would you give Santander a 3-year deal that could be 4? And if yes or if no, what AAV would you give Santander?
I would offer him, do some quick math. I think I'd give him 28 a year, 84 million over 3 years, with an option for a 4th vesting that can go closer to, 98 to 100. I think Santander's a great hitter. I do. And
he's a switch hitter too, which
I know people are going to say that, his OBP is not that great, but a player like that, whether it's him or Pete, doesn't matter which one.
Yeah.
Their job is to hit home runs.
Yep.
That's what I'm paying you to do. Your job is to come in here and hit home runs. He had 40-something home runs last year. He's been a mainstay in Baltimore. He's been fantastic for them. I think he would be a great fit. Is it going to happen? I'd probably not. I think he's going to end up taking the money from Toronto, because I think Toronto is so fucking desperate for someone to take their money that I think they're going to give him enough where he's going to say, I will go. So 4 years, 82 million. So I'm not too far off. I mean, I did it last year, so I jacked up the AAV, but that's also what the Mets have been doing. They've been saying, we're going to give you less years. We're going to give you more on the annual to come play for us, because they want to keep their options and their flexibility open.
I'll tell you what, if this deal is, if the reported deal from the Blue Jays is real, and the Mets offered 3 for 84 with a chance to make that 4 for 98, he would take the Mets deal. If the Mets were to offer that. I mean, it's a better deal.
If the Mets were, but we've heard other people say that the Mets are not in said markets. We as Mets fans and content creators and people talking heads, we want to call us, we're doing all this talking on certain players, and they're involved with some and not with others. And I know Carson has talked about this next player. I know Ants in the comments, somebody Shea has talked about Jurickson Profar as well, thinking that he's a fit. Look, I know Profar has had success on the infield. He's been successful in the outfield. He could be someone that's kind of a jack of all trades, so you can move around the diamond depending on what happens with this team. Does he fit? Absolutely he fits. Has there been connections with the Mets and Profar for years? Yes, there has. But I'm very reluctant to think of him as an option, because top as a former top prospect in the game,
top
Texas. Mm-hmm. It didn't work out in Texas. He goes elsewhere. All of his successes come on the West Coast, whether it was in Oakland or it was in San Diego. Now, a lot is going on in San Diego right now when it comes to, power struggle, family issues, the team itself. Are they going to sell? What's going to, there's a lot of question marks going on in San Diego, and probably why they're not spending as much as people think that they normally would. Does that mean he's going to leave and not get that nice 3-year type of deal that he was probably shooting for, like 375 maybe? Is he not going to get that from them now to stay there? Because I think he wants to stay in San Diego, because to me, Jurickson Profar is a Padre. Like, he's the success that he's had there, he fits like a glove. He had a fantastic year there last year. I have a hard time seeing him saying, I'm going to uproot, I'm going to go back east, and I'm going to be as successful. Does he fit? Yes, on paper, if we're playing the show, yes, it makes sense. Do I think it's going to happen? I don't think so, because I think he's going to do everything in his power to try to stay out west.
Jump back into the comments here really quick. Sometimes people agree, sometimes people disagree. These comments came in about 30 seconds apart. When I was talking, Carlos said, make John our GM, all flames emoji. And then Richard said, John doesn't have a clue. So it just goes to show you, some people think you're smart. Some people think you're dumb. The These are two good ones. Keith saying, I think I made this joke a few weeks ago, but the Mets can't sign Santander because of the naming rights to Citi Field, which is it's a
That's
great, if you live in New York, you get that joke. If you don't, I'm not sure you do. That's a good one. And I love this one from Truman Quinn. San Diego is an episode of Succession.
It really is.
Right now, what's going on?
God.
Listen, I hope that turmoil stays like that, because I think that any kind of upheaval is good for the Mets and potentially Roki Sasaki. I don't know what's going to happen there. We'll talk about him in the second half. I know that there's a lot of being made of like the Mets are not a final destination for him. It's the Dodgers or the Padres, blah, 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 blah. But I do think that based on everything we found out, Ibby, about Sasaki and what he's looking for, I'm not sure that this is the type of instability that this man wants of infighting between the widow of the owner and the owner's brothers fighting over the ownership of the team. The widow also floating out, oh, by the way, those brothers might move the team, and they're forcing out the sons of the owner. Yeah. I don't know. If I'm Roki Sasaki, I ain't hitching my horse to that cart. And you know what? We have an expert. If he's still in the comments, Paul Revere and Paul Revere's horse, you can let me know if that's a place that you would want to hitch your beloved horse to. I don't think so. I really don't, but those are two good ones. Look, I don't want to get into another conversation about Sasaki just yet, and even with some of the other names that are floated out there. So I'm going to bring this one up, and this will be the last thing we talk about before we head into the break, as it relates to just Alonso, Santander, and let's say Bregman, although we haven't brought him up much this episode. Mm-hmm. John said, I get the sense that none of the remaining big three free agents, Alonso, Santander, and Bregman, wants to sign first. And I do think that that's a factor. They are all historically different kinds of players who play different positions. And so you wouldn't think their markets are linked. But Ibby, the way that this offseason has gone, I think the first guy that blinks, like everybody said, Alonso wanted 6 years. If Alonso takes 3, he's going to hurt Santander because Santander won't get 5. Santander wanted 5. If Santander takes 2, then Bregman's not getting 7. Bregman wanted 7. If Bregman takes 4, then Alonso's not getting 6. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, if somebody blinks of these 3 guys and takes less years, they're screwing the other 2 guys. And I think that is true. I don't think any one of these guys wants to be the first one to sign.
I think that, yes, and it doesn't help that kind of puts Boras in that tough spot because he's in control with, Bregman and Alonso, trying to get as much as he can. And whichever one decides to take that pillow contract first, it's why they keep on holding out. They're hoping that someone's just going to cave and just say, okay, just take the 5 years. Like, I don't think anyone's going to do it. Like, I'm so confused with Alex Bregman. I'm so confused with the Boston Red Sox too, by the way, because everything with them makes 0 sense. This obsession with Nolan Arenado that they have, and now that's the only place he's going to end up going to. If they can't figure out a deal, he's going to have to stay. But now they're thinking about taking Arenado on, paying that money, trying to dump Yoshida, and then trade Tristan Cassis. Like, it doesn't make any fucking sense to me.
It doesn't make any sense. Why would you take on Arenado and then trade one of your best young players?
It makes absolutely
if you're a team that doesn't want to spend money.
0 fucking sense. I don't get it. And everyone says, oh, well, maybe Bregman wants to go there. It's also why I say, when the rumors come out, Vladimir Guerrero wants to play for the Red Sox. And also the same rumors that say Vladimir Guerrero wants $400+ million. And I'm like, this is the same team that wouldn't pay Mookie Betts $360 million. They're going to pay Vladimir Guerrero, the first baseman, who they're going to end up moving Rafael Devers to first base because of his size and how things are trending. They're going to move him there eventually, or they're going to pay $400 million for that DH. They're not going to do that. They're not going to do that. So nothing makes sense from that standpoint, but I agree with you. It's a lot of posturing going on because nobody wants to settle. Nobody wants to be that guy that screws everyone else. Boras is in the middle of all of it as well. So it's this waiting game, and I don't think it's going to work out. And I don't like, why would Detroit right now? Why is Detroit giving Alex Bregman 6 years? They don't have to. They don't have to, because if we've talked about the Mets and Bregman too, the Mets can say to Bregman, hey, we'll give you that pillow contract. We'll give you the 3+ years. What the 3 years, we'll give you close to $100 million. The same thing they're offering Pete. They'll say, we'll give you the same deal. If you want to take it, we'll give you the opt-outs as well. There's no reason for other teams to go to these lengths that people are saying. It's a waste of money because you're betting against yourself. Yeah. This entire thing makes no fuck. Everything is so screwed up that these guys are going to end up sitting here waiting, and I guarantee you a majority of them are going to take 3 years or less.
And at the end of the day, it comes down to billionaires crying poverty, which is the despicable thing to do, and not spending money. Somebody put in the comments before, the Marlins have spent $0 in free agency. They're not the only team. The Cardinals have spent $0 in free agency. I think the Padres, although the Padres have spent a ton of money recently, and they have the turmoil going on with their ownership that you just mentioned. But there's a lot of people, there's a lot of teams that have spent $0 in free agency.
Rosenthal brought up how, everyone has eyes on teams like Oakland, but he goes, Oakland took it upon themselves to avoid the penalties that they would face, and that's why they're spending money. That's why Sevy got the contract he did. That's why Rooker got the extension that he did. That's why they spent the money that they have to this point to stay above that threshold so they do not get hit with sanctions and things like that against the franchise. Yeah. Now he said today, it's a great point. He goes, I'm watching Miami now because Miami hasn't spent a dime, and if they end up trying to deal, which they will, we all know they will, come the deadline, if Sandy Alcantara is healthy and pitching well, they're going to trade him. They're going to get rid of him, and that's more money off of their books. Then it's going to get to the point where they're not going to be able to even spend enough to get people to take their money to go down there and try to avoid said penalties. So it's disgusting, like you said, that a team like that, has dabbled the way that they have over the last handful of, the last couple of decades, where it's like, you build up, they tear the whole thing down. They build up, they tear the whole thing down. Mm-hmm. And now it's just like, we don't even want to build up. We're just going to tear down every single year. Yeah,
it's funny. The Marlins have obviously not been a franchise for that long, all things considered. Like, we've all seen the entirety of the Marlins existence, basically. Ibby, it was frustrating when they would do the boom or bust, but their boom would usually result in a World Series championship. Yeah. And so you would sit there and you go, okay, well, yeah, we know they're going to have a fire sale after they win because they did it in 97 and they did it in 2003. But at least they got there. They got there in 97. They won it all. They tore it all down. They built it all back up a few years later, 2003. They do it again. Grassroots, boom. They win a World Series. Then they tear it all down. Since then, they've been a joke of a franchise for the most part. The closest they came was actually pretty close, all things considered, because they went out and they were able to, sign, draft, and develop Christian Yelich, Marcell Ozuna, Giancarlo Stanton, and JT Realmuto. But they didn't win anything with those guys. So,
they dealt them for nothing.
And they dealt them for absolutely nothing. Andre did say this. The Marlins have not met the floor on payroll, and they could be condemned by the MLBPA, like you said. Look, that said, let's head into the break. We've got probably about an hour to play with. If you're watching for the first time, you're like, I don't want to sit through a break. You don't have to worry. It's just a 30-second restart and an ad spot we need for the audio version of this show. So don't go anywhere. John Saponaro, Matt Ibanez, plus, of course, your questions, your comments, your concerns, all about this offseason that continues here into January, into 2025. We'll be right back with more Til Mets Do Us Part, live on YouTube, live on Twitter. We'll be right back. Yo, just like that, we are back with Til Mets Do Us Part, live on YouTube, live on Twitter, like we are each and every single week. 5:30 p.m. Eastern time. That is the start time on Wednesdays, sometimes a little bit later. Today, I think we had about 7-minute delay. That's mostly me. You know, the city I live in is entirely on fire, and I can barely stand up on one of my legs. So, you know what? We're doing the best that we can, but it's John Saponaro. It's Matt Ibanez. A lot of great comments so far. A lot of great conversation to this point with regards to the offseason, where it's been, where it is right now, where it could potentially be going. Thank you, Silly Mazzilli, saying, take your time, solid podcast. We appreciate that very, very much. Ibby, before we get back into the conversation, let's hit them with a quick word from our friends over at Independent Safes.
Absolutely, John. IndependentSafes.com. Independent Safes is protecting homes and businesses with secure residential and commercial safes, fireproof peace of mind in every corner. Visit IndependentSafes.com today for security that stands strong. And of course, when it comes to those safes, we always like putting someone in them and throwing them in the river. This week, maybe it's the Pete Alonso talk, 'cause I'm so tired of it. Maybe it's home run hitters in the comments over here who always seems to want to come in here and have some fun and say some extremely outlandish things. Either way, thank you for being here. Thank you for the sub. Probably Boras and all the nonsense that comes in. Thank you for Soto, but at this point, I'm a little bit tired of you, so maybe I'll put him in the safe this week and throw it into the river. But other than that, IndependentSafes.com. Tell them Til Mets sent you. They'll take care of you and hook you up.
GSD over on Twitter asking, how long can you breathe in an Independent Safe when they're closed? I do all my own stunts. For that, you're going to have to reach out to the folks over at Independent Safes. Til Mets Do Us Part. John Saponaro, Matt Ibanez, Brella Sports Network, John Mincone. Nobody takes any liability or responsibility as far as putting yourself in an Independent Safe. Please reach out and, if you're putting yourself in a safe, do so responsibly, I guess. I don't know. Ibby, let's jump right back into the conversation because so much stuff is going on in the comments. There's a lot of stuff that we didn't really get a chance to get to. I want to shout out Michael here. It says, hello, guys. I just subscribed. Welcome, Michael. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Michael.
For the subscribe. Oh, that was you. Wow, look at that.
Yeah.
Ibby, you are quick. You are quick with the typing. I was trying to thank him on the show. You're thanking him in the comments. We are sharing a brain. So look,
good stuff.
Unless Pete Alonso or Santander or Bregman sign during the next hour of this show, let's put that conversation to bed for this portion for this week's episode of Til Mets Do Us Part. Let's move on to some of the other stuff. I think the most meaningful way is to kind of build on the tangent. We touched a little bit on Profar and why we don't think that he is necessarily a fit for this particular team at this particular time, despite the fact that he's been linked to the team a lot. He just seems like a guy who's destined to stay out on the West Coast. If you missed any of that conversation and you want to hear about it when we're done with the live show, you can go back and watch anything you missed, or tomorrow you can download this podcast as an audio show and listen to it wherever you get your podcast. I suggest that you do that. But Ibby, the other pivot or the other addition is this Jesse Winker that we haven't heard a lot about. And then there's the Alex Verdugo that we heard the Mets were linked to. A lot of people do not like the Verdugo thing. I am in that camp. I just think, you know what? I'll bring up this comment from Benny Samuel, who I think is a new or new-ish commenter. Welcome to the show. Welcome back if you've been here before. Says, would you rather have Verdugo or Winker? For me, I'd rather have Winker because I think he fit in really, really well. And I think a lot of these same, a lot of the same roster is here. And I think Winker would fit this team in 25 the way he fit this team in 24. I don't like Verdugo. I know he's a better defensive player than Winker, and he's a more versatile player than Winker in that sense. But to me, Verdugo plays like a guy who's better than he is. There's a lot of like rolling over on ground balls and not running it out. And it's like, okay, listen, man, if you're prime Robinson Cano, you can do that. If you're Manny Machado, I'll give you that. If you're Alex Verdugo, you kind of got to put your head down and like beat that play out. I know you were traded for Mookie Betts, but you ain't Mookie Betts, man. Like, I don't know. So I don't really like Verdugo's game. I would not be happy to see the Mets. That would be the first signing or trade or acquisition of any kind under David Stearns that I just would object, that I would not like, would be Alex Verdugo.
They were linked to him last year before. Like, I remember it happened right before he got dealt to the Yanks. The Mets were thrown in as a name. And again, they're just thrown in as a name here where it's like the Mets are potentially interested and involved, but other teams are as well. I know Pittsburgh was in there as well. And look, I don't need Alex Verdugo on this team. Obviously, David Stearns potentially sees something because he was linked last year. But to me, from what I've seen, from what I've read, from people that have played in Boston and what they thought of him from a clubhouse perspective and how he fell off a cliff really with the Yanks, I'm going to bring up some stuff here that's not really gospel. I'm going to share the screen in a moment. But I'm just comparing Alex Verdugo and Jesse Winker, and then I'll give my points on Jesse Winker in a moment. But I'm going to share my screen real quick, just so we can see some of this. So here, can we see it? Are we up?
There we go.
Okay. So we're looking right there. Savant is a guide. It's not the gospel. Okay. The 2024 MLB percentile rankings when it comes to Alex Verdugo, and you see what he offers. And to John's point before, you're seeing his value when it comes to the defensive side. Now, when I bring up Jesse Winker, they are pretty much similar when you look at the two. Okay. Did it show up yet? It's not. Let me share this screen. So I will bring this one up as well because it's nearly identical when you see them. And here we go. They're nearly identical in terms of the red and blue from a hitting perspective. And the difference here is the range when it comes to fielding for Winker versus Verdugo. Now, is that enough to say that I want, Alex Verdugo over Jesse Winker? No, it's not, because for me, where this team is, I want the better offensive player, and I want the guy that's been here that had success, that not only had success, but had success at the highest level for this team in the playoffs, where he had the highest of, OPS and things of that nature, when people were screaming when he wasn't in the lineup, when they were messing around with the lineup. So it's like, I don't know why they wouldn't want Jesse Winker back. And I know people were screaming about and very upset about it last night. And I was just telling people to, like, hey, just relax. It's literally just, it's talking, like nothing has happened yet. So I look at it and I go, maybe this is just a way to move things along. The Mets don't usually leak a lot of stuff. So when something like this comes out, it kind of makes me feel like it was done on purpose almost to maybe push things along to where, like, hey, maybe the Verdugo talk was made to try and close Jesse Winker in a way, like close a deal. Like, that's kind of the way I've been looking at it, because I still feel Winker fits more because he's here, he's done it, he makes sense. The vibes, the overall feel when it comes to a clubhouse player, he's that asshole type of player that we've always said we would like to have on our team. He was the heel against us. He became our face. So now he's a jerk to everybody else. He's been accepted. Like, it makes too much sense. So I don't understand the Verdugo like. I don't understand the Verdugo link outside of last year, like why David Stearns has been, targeting this as a player. Maybe it's that much of an obsession when it comes to defense. I'm not sure, but I still think it's better to take the offensive player and the guy that really fit in with this team at a huge high point for them, and that being Jesse Winker. So I would much rather have Winker over Verdugo.
And listen, if we go into the comments and we take this sample size as gospel, no one wants Verdugo.
No, some hilarious names.
We've got Aunt Rivera Subway to Shay saying, bring back Winker already. He has the grit and the swagger this team has lacked for so long. Brad saying no to Verdugo. Andre, Verdugo is an atrocious option. We got Truman Poopgo. We got Zero Cool. Vertigo is another Benintendi.
Oh my God, yeah.
We have Corey saying Winker because he already fit in with the team chemistry. Richard just laughing at calling him Vertigo, but also doesn't want him. Dan saying Versucco. Brad, Winker already fit in and Verdugo sucks. I think that's fair. Armand, Verdugo is more glove than bat. Aunt Rivera saying, "Give me Winker." Okay. Winker. All right.
Okay.
Let's get Winker.
Okay.
Corey saying at least Winker brings energy and can DH. Look, there's a lot of comments here. Silly Mazzilli, no, take Winker any day of the week. Carlos Ramos, Winker fits like a glove, in my opinion. He's the attitude he brings, the clutch hitting. Man, Winker delivered in the postseason. I'd bring him back regardless of the other moves. Andre calling it a slam dunk. Richard, Verdugo fell off a cliff last year after a good start. So all of that stuff is well taken. But I like this one from Andre. We have Siri and Taylor who are more glove than bat. How many more do we need? Ibby, that's a great point.
It is a great point.
You've got a center field platoon that I think, again, I said it in the first half, I think they will be more effectively offensively than the center field platoon we had last year with Taylor and Bader, just because I think Siri brings a different element. I think Bader and Taylor became a bit more of the same kind of hitter. And so I think you're going to get something potentially a little bit better out of both of these guys this year. But you have glove first players there. If you go back to what I was talking about before, you don't know what you're getting out of McNeil anymore. Mm-hmm. He might be a little bit more of a glove first player, because I've always said on this show, he needs to hit at least 300, and it's probably more like 310 to be a adequate offensive player, because everything he does is based off of batting average. I don't think he's going to hit 300 anymore in his career. So to me, he becomes more glove than bat. And then if you pivot to one of the kids, well, look, I love what Acuna did last year in a small sample size, but he's a guy who profiles more glove than bat. We don't know what some of the other young guys are going to be. So you really can't afford to bring in another guy who's more glove than bat. People keep waiting and waiting and waiting and waiting for Verdugo to have a breakout year as an offensive player. And he just doesn't, because I think this is what he is. He's not that good.
He is what he is, man. It doesn't help for, in comparison, like what you said before, the player he was traded for comes across like a try-hard in a sense. And I think that rubbed a lot of people wrong in Boston, which is why you heard a lot of the negativity that you heard from players that were in that clubhouse versus ones that were close to that clubhouse. So it goes against a lot of the stuff that we've talked about from the positive end for this team. And I just don't see it as a fit. I have no issue when it comes to like other Mets fans have issues where, when the Mets sign former Yankees or whatever, I just want good ball players and smart ball players. And this is one where it's like, no, I'm okay. I don't need him. I don't want him over here. Please bring back Jesse Winker. Like I said at the start of the offseason that I thought Winker was gone because I thought somebody would give him at least 2 years and a chance to potentially start. Still possible. Not saying it's impossible, but if it comes back to a 1-year deal, I could see him coming back, and that favors the Mets more, and the unsure nature that a lot of us feel, and some of the tea leaves when you read them when it comes to Nimmo's foot, if he's going to be able to do what we all think he can do in left field. Having someone that can go out there and handle themselves. Winker's not the greatest of outfielders, but again, he does enough, and I think he would fit fine over there. So having him does make sense, and he would have an avenue towards playing time.
Yeah, and look, sometimes guys are not that – look, the advanced statistics are important. I'm not a guy who sits here and says advanced statistics don't matter. I don't think that conventional statistics don't matter. I think all statistics matter, but sometimes I think that these statistics get overblown. And the reason why I bring that up is because a lot of the advanced statistics will tell you that Jesse Winker is like a terrible outfielder. And Ibby, having watched him play, I don't think he's terrible. I don't think he's not a guy out there who's going to step on his own feet. Yeah. So I think sometimes you have to put statistics where they belong, which is all of this information is important. It shows you some stuff. It tells you some stuff, but then you also have to watch the games with your eyes. And look, I don't think, to your point, if you need to put Winker out there for the first 6 innings of a game because Nimmo's foot is acting up or whatever, Nimmo needs to be fresher, you can pivot. And then you go and you're going to have an outfield that's going to include Jose Siri and Tyrone Taylor, both guys who are plus defenders. You're never taking Soto out of the game. I know he's not a good defender, but you're never taking him out of the game because he's a superstar and he's your marquee bat. But on the other side of it, whether you needed to take Nimmo out of the game for defense or Winker out of the game for defense or whatever, you're going to have a guy who's a plus defender going out there who's going to be able to carry the load. And then you also have a situation where right now it seems like, depending on the moves they make, that Luis Angel Acuna is going to be on this team in some way, shape, or form. And if Acuna's on this team, I don't know. I've not seen him play center field, but he seems like another guy who can go out in the outfield and play good defense. And so I don't think you need to worry about a guy like Verdugo. Go get me the offensive player. Again, I don't think he's going to be out there tripping over his feet. And Zero Cool says it. He ain't Jay Bruce. And I agree. Winker's not great. He's not Jay Bruce. Let's not make him out like he's some kind of guy who can't, like, he's just going to have like fly balls bounce off his forehead. Like he's not that bad. So I don't know. To me, it's Winker all day.
I just, again, for me, it's, and I don't know, you don't do things strictly based off of the vibes, but everything that he brought is just, and we've talked about it when he first came here, and we talked about at the deadline how we're like, this is the guy that we said, like, I want Jesse Winker on this team. Like, this is the guy that I think you could bring in that makes sense. It's a lefty, it's a platoon. Like, there's so much that made sense. And he comes here and he succeeds. Like, that's the guy that I want, because I want that type of player. And you have to have those types of players with a lot of changeover that this team is going through, with a lot of the OMG Mets not being here anymore, potentially not coming back. You got to maintain some semblance of what it was. And I think he's a piece that makes sense in staying. So I hope he does remain with the team. I do.
And look, keeping it completely 100, like going back to the beginning of the offseason, Ibby, you and I talked about this a little bit. I said, of the guys who are not like, or have the biggest chance of not being back, you take Iglesias, Winker, Bader, JD Martinez, like that collection of people from the 2024 Mets. I said right from the jump, Winker's the guy who makes the most sense to come back. A lot of people argued and said it's Iglesias because of the OMG and all this stuff. It's Winker. It's always been Winker. And I do love this comment from Ray. Verdugo, take your turtleneck.
I was laughing.
And go fuck off to a place like Colorado. You know what? It's cold in Colorado in April. You'll need that turtleneck. You get out of here.
Oh my God.
Take his turtleneck and piss off to Colorado. I like that.
Oh my God.
Look, everybody seems to be in lockstep with us on this Winker Verdugo thing. So hopefully Verdugo is a nothing scenario. Maybe to your point, maybe it's to put a little bit of pressure on Winker to try to come back. But I think for now, we can leave that conversation where it is. Let's transition to the guy that I mentioned earlier, which is Roki Sasaki. A lot of different comments about Sasaki from earlier. Andre brought this up. He said, doesn't look like Sasaki is coming to the Mets according to Martino, but then followed it up by saying, no one has a clue on Sasaki. Martino is just guessing. Ibby, I do think that Andre's right. I mean, obviously the first one, he's just saying what Martino said and what's been reported. I don't think it's a slam dunk that Sasaki is coming here. I think it's anything but. But I think the Mets have as good a chance as any. I would not buy into what a lot of people are pushing right now, which is the Dodgers and the Padres are not spending their international money until they know what's going on with Sasaki, and that could be lining them up to sign him. Well, neither are the Mets, so couldn't that be lining the Mets up to sign? Like, you know what I mean? Like, they're using it in those two instances specifically, saying, oh, it probably means they're squirreling away the money for him. Well, the Mets haven't started spending their international money like crazy yet either. And I don't think there's going to be some players that maybe the Dodgers or the Padres or whomever miss out on because of the money they spend on Sasaki, that maybe another team like the Mets might swoop in and try to get if the Dodgers can't sign them because they signed Sasaki. So I think most teams that have been in it to this point, they are going to hang on to their money for international free agency until Sasaki makes a decision. And right now, I would say that the Mets are still in it. I don't have any insider information, Ibby, but I just think reading this situation as we've seen it so far, Wolf being so open about what Sasaki wants and what he's looking for, I think the Mets are still in it. It's just my gut, but I think the Mets are still in this.
And one thing that I couldn't stand, I think it was yesterday or 2 days ago, because I know someone brought up Martino saying how they think that, the Mets aren't players here. But I believe it was on that same broadcast when they started talking Yankees, and it was the Yankees definitely have a shot. They're in the top 2 at least, top 2 or 3 when it comes to Sasaki. And I'm just like, why? Like, what is the difference here? Like, can you explain to me like why you think the Mets have no shot, but the Yankees have a shot? Can we talk about that for a moment? Because I'm very, very curious, especially coming off of an offseason where we saw the Mets pluck the best player, in some opinion, one of the best hitters from said team to come to Queens. Like,
sorry to derail you, but
good.
it's so dumb because look, the Yankees. I hate to bring up old episodes, but a few weeks ago we talked about this. I think what the Yankees have done in their pivot from Soto has been great. They brought in a lot of good players and they have rebuilt their team in a way that I think will work for their team. Sure, they're taking flyers on some guys because I don't know if Goldschmidt is washed or not, but a guy like Bellinger, I think he can hit a lot of home runs in Yankee Stadium, blah, blah, blah. I think their pivot has been great. And AB, I argued on this show that the Yankees were in a better place not allocating all the money to Juan Soto. I said that the Mets needed Soto, and you agreed more than the Yankees did. All of that is true. But these are the same people who are saying that the Yankees are a better team without Juan Soto. That is just objectively, patently false. How do you lose a 26-year-old superstar in a Hall of Fame trajectory that has been legitimately compared to Ted Williams and get better? That's bullshit. Paul Goldschmidt is not better than Juan Soto. Cody Bellinger is not better than Juan Soto.
But when they add it all up, they're like, oh, we got 4 players instead of just 1.
That's some fucking Moneyball. We're better in aggregate bullshit.
And it's also still not enough because I know WAR's not everything, but when you add all their cumulative WAR up for the upcoming season, it is not equal to that of Juan Soto. So did you get better? Because you're still not better than the one player and what that one player provides. So all of it's nonsense to me. I'm going to wait this out. And I saw that, who put it in the comments? I want to be able to go back and find it. Somebody had mentioned in the comments that they think it's going to come down to the Mets and the Dodgers. And I still believe that because it brings me back to that Athletic article that came out weeks ago where they were saying all the things that make sense for Sasaki. And I said, only 2 teams make sense here when it comes to all of this entire checklist. It's the Mets and it's the Dodgers. And the person might have been Rosie, I'm not sure if it was, saying that it's probably ultimately going to be the Dodgers. And I believe that too. I think this is lining up to be exactly how things played out with Yamamoto, where it's back and forth. Obviously, it's not so much the money that is allowing the back and forth here. Ultimately, it's going to come to the fact that location, where the Dodgers are, the Japanese market, and the ability to slide into a place and just be yourself. And there's not the pressure of having to be the end-all be-all. Now, maybe he wants to be that because from what Wolf has said, he wants to establish himself as a superstar and as the guy. And he still could, even amongst those people, because as we've said on the show, Joe DeMayo, others within the industry have said this guy can potentially be the greatest pitcher in the world. He could because he has the stuff. So he could still do it for this juggernaut that is the LA Dodgers, even when he is teammates with Shohei Ohtani and Yoshinobu Yamamoto. Like, it's all possible. Right. So I still think that the Mets have a shot. Do I think it's going to end up happening? I don't. I think they're going to end up using that money and maintaining Elian Pena, who was the number 2 prospect from the international market as a shortstop. I know people are going to complain, oh my God, another shortstop, but don't. He's a very talented bat. It's good to have players like that within your system. So, and all the great players are shortstops anyway. So all that being said, it's fun to talk about. It's fun to dream about. I think this is why I think that's part of what Passan was saying when he said the Mets are still in on outfielders, relief pitchers, and starters. I think starters was waiting out the Sasaki market. Yeah. And then if that happens, great. There's another starter. If not, we're going to pivot elsewhere. We're going to focus on our offense, and we will fill in our pen along the way, and then maybe attack starter at the deadline.
Yeah, zero cool. Great point. Shortstop is like the only position that gets signed in the international free agent market. It's true.
Everyone's
because to your point, all the great players start off as shortstops. And not all
the good players. All the good players play shortstop.
Start off as shortstop, especially internationally. But it's just a good point from you. It's a good point from Zero Cool. Ibby, correct me if I'm wrong, but next week when we record, it will be the 15th of January. So we may have an answer on Sasaki by that point.
It's possible. It's possible because I think the deadline. I think the deadline is the 15th, but I don't know if he has to say what it is. It's like a decision has to be made, but I don't know if it has to go public. For some reason, the 23rd is ringing to me as well. And maybe Armand, if you're still in the chat, you can double check because you're usually up on stuff like this, or if anyone can in the chat. I think between the 15th and 23rd. So Brad here is saying the deadline is the 23rd. Okay.
That's what I thought.
You know what? The 15th is the opening of the international spending market. Okay. So that's when it opens. 23rd is the actual deadline. Okay.
So he's been an international free agent for X amount of time, but he couldn't. There we go. Won't sign on the 15th. The deadline is the 23rd. According to his agent, he won't sign on the 15th. So we will not have a resolution by the time we record next week, more than likely, but we will be in the end game now, to quote Dr. Strange, because we will be in that final phase where he has to sign before the 23rd. And yes, Brad, bring it up. Thank you. The money resets for the year on the 15th, which is why these teams are waiting with regards to their international spending. Silly Mazzilli saying Roki reminds me of the Japanese version of the 86 Doc Gooden, has nasty stuff. That's what we're talking about. People are saying, and it is not hyperbole, he has the best stuff in the world. Like, that is how good his stuff is. Will he be the best pitcher in the world? That remains to be seen. More things come into play, but pure stuff, people have said you could make a case that he has the best pure stuff in the world right now, which is incredibly high praise. And again,
for a 23-year-old, absolutely.
Yeah. And from a lot of folks, it is not hyperbole. Look, I don't know if he's going to come to the Mets. I just think that I don't have a feeling either way. I'm not saying like you that I'm leaning Dodgers. I'm just going to wait this out. And I think the pitching market, I think the Mets are waiting it out too. And I think some other pitchers might be waiting it out. Like, look, do I think the Mets are done in starting pitching if they don't get Sasaki? I think more than likely, but I could see a scenario where, I don't know, somebody like a Flaherty falls into their lap on a 1-year deal if they don't get Sasaki and they decide to add to their rotation. Or I said this before, maybe the Mets do have an idea as to what it would take to sign, to trade for Luis Castillo, but they don't want to execute that trade until they know whether or not they're getting Sasaki. I think that's possible. So I do think that there's a chance that the Mets dip back into the starting pitching market after Sasaki. What do you think about that?
I definitely think I think that is possible. I don't know. I just think that overall, when it comes to the pitchers, I think Stearns is set in his way and he wants to see this through. And if something becomes available, if something just makes too much sense, similar to last offseason with JD Martinez, if something just it falls into our laps, it makes sense, we're going to pivot, we can do this. I think something along those lines is definitely doable. And I see some people in the chat mentioning some names. Jack Flaherty's still out there. Dylan Cease could be available via trade because he's on a 1-year deal. Who knows what's going on with San Diego, like we were saying before. But I don't know. I just think that the rest of the funds that are going to be used are going to be done via the offense, unless, and we can use this as a segue, unless we decide to pivot and throw some serious cash in the bullpen, as our main man Subway to Shea Ant Rivera and my main man John Saponaro over there has said on Ant's show when talking about the bullpen, one being Tanner Scott, who the Mets have met with, according to the great Will Salmon. Shout out to him over at The Athletic. the Mets have met with them. Now, the rumor did come out. Tanner Scott wants at least $20 million a year. Some think that could be 3, maybe 4 years. So we're talking $60 to $80 million for a guy that's 30 to solidify the back end of your pen. John, are you one that wants to do that? And a follow-up, do you think it could happen?
I think it could happen. I do think it could happen. I think the Mets need more sure things in their bullpen. I've said this a lot, Ibby. I was a big proponent of Hicks. I know the Giants got him, and then they made Hicks a starter. I think the Mets need more players with electric stuff in the bullpen besides Edwin Diaz. So, and look, they did a better job at it this year. I think when certain guys are right, they have really good stuff, right? Like Daniel Nunez had great stuff prior to getting hurt. Reed Garrett, when he's right, has some wipeout pitches. Somebody mentioned here was Jose Lopez Moya said, Stanek is still out there. Would you bring him back? Like, I would.
Oh, please.
I would bring back
so
Stanek. Stanek throws 100 miles an hour. He's got postseason playoff experience in the bullpen. He was really good down the stretch for us. He's got guts. Bring back a Stanek. But you know what? Get me Tanner Scott too. You want guys with plus stuff in the back end of the bullpen. And I think that's important. So I would, and yeah, Stearns had Hader and Williams in Milwaukee. I think that's a good point. If I scroll up a little bit, Zero Cool. Remember when the Bronx had Chapman, Andrew Miller, and Betances? Why can't the Mets have Tanner Scott, Diaz, and Tyler Yates? I mean, look, just start with Diaz and Tanner Scott, at least. And I think that's what you need to do to build one of these great bullpens. Look, do I think Garrett was overworked? I do. Do I think he'd be better if they could trust somebody else? I do. But it'd be part of trusting somebody else is bringing in somebody with a little bit of a known commodity. And I know that bullpens are fickle and relief pitchers are fickle. And Tanner Scott is 30. And Tanner Scott had 2 years where he, really kind of rose into the player that he is now. But sometimes you guys just spend money, man. Go ahead and spend the money. And yes, Armand, Kirby Yates, not Tyler Yates, but yeah, same thing. Same concept of building this super bullpen. I would do it. If you're telling me it's $20 million for 3 years, I would do it. I would.
I think the Mets, if they were serious, they would jack up the price again and try to go for the 3 years as opposed to the 4. And they'd be like, we'll give you $75 million for 3 years. Will you take it? I think that is something. It is possible. And again, it depends on what happens with this team in terms of other areas, how I think they're going to allocate. I know they have all the money in the world, but I still think David Stearns is going to be smart about it. And I have a hard time with him investing that much cash because I know we said in the chat that, he had Hader and Williams, but they weren't making money there. It's like he developed and had these guys and got the most out of them, and then he dealt Hader away. And then Hader got his big payday from Houston. So he hasn't been the one to give these pitchers the big deals. He seems to be against it. He wants to build and create. So is Tanner Scott the guy that he's going to do this for? Does it make sense for this team in the short term? Yes. Would it be nice to have a Tanner Scott on the back end with an Edwin Diaz when you go up against some of the bats that you do within this division? When you're facing a Bryce Harper late, would it be nice if you're facing the Dodgers in a big game and you got to go up against Shohei Ohtani? Okay, you're facing these guys with loaded lineups with big time bats. It would be great to be able to disperse Edwin Diaz in the 7th or the 8th, and then you can have Reed Garrett in the 7th or in the 8th, and then you could have Tanner Scott close it out. There are different ways that you can move this around where we can do what we like this team doing, and that's using your best pitchers in the best of spots to help you succeed, regardless of inning, regardless of name or moniker that they have of closer. They can only pitch the 9th. It's like, no, if the heart of the lineup's coming up in the 7th and this is a tight game, I want to handle this right now. And then Diaz can come in, and then you can have Tanner Scott on the back end to close things out for you later on. It makes all the sense in the world. I'm just very hesitant to think that Stearns is going to throw $70+ million at a reliever.
I know you just brought up this comment before, but here's why I think it's possible from Brad. Diaz does have the opt-out next year.
Mhm.
Now, it's going to take a lot for Diaz
It
to
will.
opt out.
It will.
Diaz is going to have the kind of year that he had in Seattle when he got traded to us, which was historic, or he's going to have the kind of year he had with us a couple of years ago.
22, yeah.
When he made the big money contract.
Yeah.
But he has done it twice. I just mentioned those 2 seasons. So could he have that kind of year? Yes. Will he opt out even if he does have that kind of year? I don't know. He makes a lot of money. He did sign that deal very fast to stay here. Is there a possibility that he can make more money? Maybe. But I do think with the opt-out in there, you do cover your bases a little bit if you decide to sign this deal with Tanner Scott. Do I think that makes it likely? I'm not sure. Do I think that it makes it a little bit more possible? I do. I think it's like, okay, I think there's something to it. That's all I'll say as far as that's concerned. Zero Cool says Tanner is a lefty, so his real age is 23.
It's
because
true.
lefties last forever. And then Andre said, when was the last time we had a great lefty late inning reliever? Billy Wagner? Probably.
I forgot who were we having? I was having a conversation with somebody about this. Like, who was the last? I think it might have been Rube, who usually frequents our chat. I was talking to him on the side, and we were talking about lefty relievers. I was like, I think it's Wagner. I think that like dominant lefty, because I did say, I was like, we had the great year of Loop, who's a lefty, but he's not a hard throwing lefty in that sense. He's more crafty. So It's like it might be Wagner. It might be.
I think so. I think Loop, I think you're right. Loop was the last best year, start to finish, from a late inning reliever, but late inning lefty reliever. But yeah, I mean, you have to, Scott Schoenweiss, that's the one.
R.I.P. Feliciano. Great. He was fantastic.
Great. But
he was fantastic. Yeah.
Yeah, man. I still Pedro Feliciano or Wagner, I think is what you have to. The 1 year from Loop, I don't really count for everything that you already said. I just think I just don't, I don't know. He's not the guy that like rings out to me that I would say, oh, it's that guy. That's the guy. Yeah. Because he wasn't really before that, and he hasn't really been that since. Zero Cool saying Diaz ain't opting out. Carlos Ramos saying, I don't think he'll opt out even if he has another super year. He talks about the Mets too much, loves playing with Lindor. I do think you're both probably right. But I think having the opt-out in his contract, because one, I'm not sure he has that super year, that super duper can't miss greatest year ever year, which is what it would take. And then you're right. I don't know if he can make more money anyway, or if he wants to play somewhere else. But the point is, he does have that option, Ibby, and I think you do hedge your bets a little bit. I think you cover yourself a little. So I'm not confident the Mets will get Scott, but I'm happy that they're talking to him. And I would pay him $20 million a year easily.
It makes sense, too, because this team knows that it needs better production from the pen. And if you add someone of that stature towards the back end, it allows others to move up. It takes less pressure off. It allows Reed Garrett to just be what he's been. Like, you don't have to tax him the way that you did last year, where he had the extreme up to the extreme down to then coming back to what we had hoped that he could be. Like, there are guys that can still be successful, the guys that you can filter in and out that are of, these split contracts, and the guys you call up and you try something out, and this guy comes out of the blue and he's successful. Like, you can still do all of that while signing someone like Scott. I would love it to happen. I would love to have an arm like that. I would love to have it also so it doesn't end up going to a team like the Braves or the Dodgers. That'd be great as well, so it doesn't go there. But I guess it's a situation where it's like, I have to see it happen. I have to see David Stearns throw money, legitimate money, at a relief pitcher. And I don't know if it'll happen.
Let me bring this comment up since you said that. This is from Nick R., who's been with us before, but this is his first comment of the day. What up, Nick?
What's up, Nick?
You need good quality pitchers to beat top teams. Not always going to catch lightning in a bottle. Stearns needs to open up the purse strings a little on the pen. So this kind of goes along with what you were just saying. Look, I'm not saying that Nick is saying this because he's not. What he's saying is very specific. And I'm not saying this because I don't think it's true. I don't think Stearns is cheap. I think that's foolish. I think he came from a small market where he didn't have a lot of money, but it's very clear, not just with Juan Soto. I understand the owner pushed that over the finish line, but even with Yamamoto last year, the negotiations, all that stuff, Stearns is willing to pay. He paid top dollar, above top dollar for, and I'm not comparing these players, but Stearns paid over market value in a way for Clay Holmes, because if Clay Holmes is a fifth starter at the money he's making, it's a great deal. But if Clay Holmes has to go back to the bullpen because he's not a starter, you're actually paying him above market value. Now, not by much, probably about $1 million, maybe $1.5 million. But the point is, Stearns sees value and he will pay for value. So I don't think he's cheap, and I don't think that's what Nick is saying. But I think Nick is right, Ibby, where despite the fact that bullpens are fickle and relief pitchers are up and down, like I said before, sometimes you have to go and get the guaranteed guy, or at least you don't know if you hope they're going to be what they've been, but you kind of need to invest some money there because you got to have a top flight arm, because these top teams have great hitting and you need great pitching to combat them.
You do. And I think the other thing that why I still, lean towards the apprehension of Stearns is because I think a lot of the stuff that he does is also based on ROI, that return on investment. So if I'm putting X amount of money into something, I better be getting that dollar worth back. And shout out to Carson, because I think he's the one who showed me this, where they showed the overall war of the pitching going into next year, and the Mets were inside the top 5 when everyone's ripping them when it comes to Clay Holmes and Frankie Montas and how the overall starting rotation looks, and you don't have an ace and this and that, and talking about money spent versus what the money earned against that war could be. And the Mets were plus 10 million in terms of what they were doing. So that's them using money elsewhere. And that people will say, well, who cares because you have all the money in the world. But again, it's also about being smart. Look, I'm saying that I would love to have Tanner Scott on this team. I think it makes a lot of sense in the short term. I do. I think it makes sense as you're trying to compete and win within these early windows of a Juan Soto, and helping win within not only the early window of Juan Soto, but as we creep towards the older years of Francisco Lindor. Yeah, he's only 30 years old, but still things happen, and we're creeping towards, he's not 26 anymore like a Soto is. So you want to be able to win for him as well. So it makes sense to have someone like that, having a dominant lefty, which his team hasn't had. Look, I get it. I would welcome it. I would be ecstatic if it happened. I'm just, like I said, I need to see it happen before I can say, this is what's going to happen. This is why it should happen. It's like, oftentimes when I talk on here, I try to think from the perspective of David Stearns or whoever the GM is, or the Pobo. And that's just kind of the way that I see it right now.
Jump back into the comments here. S-Man saying, if they get Sasaki, does Holmes go back to the pen? No. I think Holmes goes back to the pen if Holmes doesn't make it as a starter. Now, doesn't make it as a starter is a very open-ended comment, and I acknowledge that. I don't know what doesn't make it as a starter means. Now, if he comes out in spring training and he doesn't have the stamina and he's getting shelled and things aren't great, I think that's going to be an early sign, but I don't think that's going to happen.
Well,
he's going to be preparing to stretch out. And he was a starter at one point in his career.
And he said at one point that the way he prepares in a given offseason, he prepares as a starter, he said. So when he says he thinks he can throw 150 innings, he says because my body is able and ready for something like that and a workload like that. So I don't think the guy's lying when he says that, because otherwise he's going to go out there, he's going to blow his arm out by the time June rolls around.
Correct. So I don't think the better way to put this is Holmes Holmes going back to the pen is purely dependent on Holmes and no one else.
I agree.
If he's not a good starter, he'll go back to the pen. Is that going to take 2 months, 6 months, I don't know, a whole season. I'm not sure. But it has nothing to do with who else they get. And Zero Cool saying Holmes has a slide piece from the 13th level of hell. He should be ultra dominant. He might be. He might just be. Now, I think, his stuff is going to play really, 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 really well in Citi Field, especially. Ibby, and there's a couple comments going on. Ant Rivera says overpaid, talking about Stearns, and overpaid for Frankie Montas, where Carlos then asked why the Mets gave that deal to Montas, and Ant saying has to do with potential. And then you see Zero Cool saying, if you look at his brief numbers with the Brewers last year, the Stearns school had a real effect on him. I really think that this is the point right here. Look, I was shocked by the Montas thing. I do think there's a little bit of what Ant is saying with Sevy 2.0, because he had really good stuff in Oakland, suffered an injury. They're hoping to build him back. But maybe I was a little shocked about it in terms of the years. I think the AAV is not an overpay. He made $16 million last year. He's making $17.5. To me, it's just it's a fair raise for a guy who had a pretty good year. And I think when you look at Montas, you have to look at Montas as the replacement for Jose Quintana. And I know Quintana had some great games down the stretch and in the playoffs, and we thank him for that. But Ibby, I would rather have Montas and his upside of stuff than Jose Quintana back in 2025. And if that means adding a year or two to the deal to get Montas, I think it's a better investment. We use the term ROI all the time when it comes to free agents. I think Montas is the better ROI than Jose Quintana, and I think that's who he's replacing. I don't know. It's a Severino type thinking, but I think he replaces Quintana. You're trying to take a leap in stuff.
Yeah, and I think that the money doesn't shock me, because I said this at the QBC. I said this, leading up to that show also. When it comes to a guy like Montas, and when you don't develop your pitchers and you don't have guys ready, this is what you have to do within the market. You got to give these guys, you got to jump the market a little bit before it gets crazy. And so you get him at a 17.5, which is, again, a brief jump up from what he had the previous year, which doesn't shock me at all, because he made $16 million last year with Cincinnati, and then he goes to Milwaukee, does his thing. But I just think that it's innings. You're paying for innings. And this guy has averaged 170 innings in his career over the, 8 years he's played or whatever, something along those lines. He's provided innings for the most part, sans the injuries that he's had. The guy goes out there and throws. That's what this team needs. Been saying it for the last 3 years. They need innings, innings, innings. They got very fortunate last year getting the amount of innings that they did from Severino and Minaya. That covered a lot of ground. So you pay someone like this, albeit, look, it's expensive, but the way of the world, the way of pitching, how volatile it is, if a guy's going to go out there and provide innings, he's going to get paid. Doesn't matter what his ERA is. The guy can go out there and throw 6 innings. You're getting paid. You're going to have a job. So that doesn't shock me at all. And I think the hope really is, can he provide us what the likes of Minaya and Severino did from an innings perspective at least? You want more, but I think the innings is what they're really hunting there.
Yeah, I agree. I've said this a lot in the way modern baseball is played. And this is why I always say it's great to have an ace, but you don't truly need an ace. It's all about the innings. You look at like the quality of innings through the starting rotation and into the bullpen, and how you give yourself the best quality of innings. It's with the best stuff for as long as you possibly can, with as many machinations as you possibly can. And I think that's what they're looking at with regards to Montas. And there we go. 1,200 subscribers on YouTube. You guys rock. Yes, indeed you do. Ibby, I'm going to take these 2 comments. We'll use these as the last 2 things that we talk about here today before we get out of here for the week. First one from Armand. This is from a bit ago. I want the Mets to call the Padres for Cease and Arise. Both will be free agents after next year. Arise can play first or second, and you can move McNeil to first. I love Armand. I would not do this at all, ever. I like Dylan Cease. I think he's really good. I would rather, if the Mets are going to trade for a pitcher, go trade and get Luis Castillo because you have control of Luis Castillo and you have cost certainty with Luis Castillo. The other part of it is you cannot, in the year of our Lord 2025, play McNeil at first base, and you cannot have a lineup where there are only 9 spots where 2 of them are being occupied by hitters like Luis Ariz and Jeff McNeil. That is some dead ball era bullshit. And I can't do it. Armand, I love you. You are a great viewer, a great commenter, seem like a cool dude. I love the profile picture that the Mets use, Roman Reigns, Sean Manaea. I love you. I cannot do this deal. I can't do any part of it. I like Cease, and I understand the logic with Cease. But go out and get me a cost-controlled pitcher. Go out. If you're going to trade for a pitcher, you're going to give up assets. Bring back Luis Castillo, not Dylan Cease. And the Ariz thing, I wouldn't touch. I know the holiday season is over, but with a 39.5-foot pole.
Here we go. With Ariz, look, I like Dylan Cease too, and would love to have him. Great fit. Free agent, you can just pay him next year, though. But things change throughout the season. If you want something, if you're pushing for something, that's a different story. But Ariz, here's some quick stats for you. And I'm going to compare him. This is someone posted this. I'm going to use it. So shout out to them. It's comparing Luis Ariz and someone that was on this team last year. Free agent right now. That's Jose Iglesias, Mr. OMG himself. Last year, in 270 at-bats, Jose Iglesias hit 337 with 20 extra base hits. In 637 at-bats, Luis Ariz hit 314 with 39 extra base hits. Iglesias' walk rate is 4.1%. Ariz's walk rate is 3.6%. Iglesias is a league average base runner and still strong defensively, whereas Ariz is a below average base runner and is the worst fielding second baseman in baseball. So again, there is no reason to really give assets up for a player like that. I don't understand why the Yankees, and this isn't a Yankee show, but I don't understand why the Yankees want him. He's basically worse than Gleyber Torres, and they couldn't wait to get him out of town. So I don't understand that.
According to Zero Cool, he is basically useless.
So just hearing stuff like that, and I think it's because, we get caught up, and I'm not trying to take anything away from Luis Ariz. I think he's a fantastic hitter. It's good to see, some of the little bit of older baseball still exist and can succeed to an extent. Like you've said, it's an elite tool. He's an elite guy that can put bat to ball, which is great. You don't see guys hitting 300 plus anymore, which is still cool to see. But just look at the numbers I just gave you for, half the at-bats, providing similar output for a guy that one is considered, one of the best hitters in baseball, like bat to ball skills. And the other one is considered, a run-of-the-mill journeyman who got lucky in a season, who moonlights as a Latin pop star. So there's just, I don't know. I don't think it'd be smart to give up said players for someone like that.
No, look, and Armand saying, I'm just done waiting for Pete, which is fair.
I understand. I get it. I do.
I get that. And Zero Cool saying, so, oh my God, is better by a comfortable amount. Got it. Yeah, look, I think, I think you have to be fair.
Comments.
There's a lot of commentary that happens online about Luis Ariz. Now, I don't like the type of player that Luis Ariz is, because I don't think that he is great for the modern game. But like you said, I have acknowledged he has an elite tool, and the elite tool is bat to ball. But like Carson said in our group chat, Luis Ariz is just waiting for Jeff McNeil's career. Like, McNeil was that 3-4 years ago. And look how he's fallen off, because Ariz does not have great bat speed. He has great bat control. He doesn't drive the ball. Like, I give him credit for winning all these batting titles. But I don't know, Ibby, to me, you brought up Jose Iglesias, and the year that he had. And I think it's a fair comparison. But I'm going to bring up a guy again from another era, or two guys from another era. Like, Luis Arraez isn't even Luis Castillo or Juan Pierre. Those guys did not have any pop, but they were elite defenders for a time. They were base stealers. So, you get on first, okay, maybe it's a double most times, especially in their prime. You know that you could score on a ball in the gap easily. Like, they brought other things to the table. To me, when you look at a guy who already doesn't have elite bat speed, you're just waiting for him to fall off a cliff. And that's what McNeil did. And zero cool. McNeil hit 23 homers in 1 year. Arraez can't do that in wiffle ball. I agree.
Zero.
I agree.
Oh my God, that cracked me up. That's
so look.
Oh,
yes, and thank you for furthering my point, Zero. Castillo and Pierre were good fielders and had speed. Pierre never struck out. I think that's all worth bringing up. And then the last thing is, Ibby, from GSD over on Twitter, do you think that there will be better players available at the trade deadline than are available now? I know in a way that's an impossible question to ask because you don't know sometimes who's going to be available. You could try to forecast it based on contract and where certain teams are projected to finish and be during the deadline, but you never really do know. But the reason why I ask you this, and the reason why I want to end the show on this, is because one of the beat reporters, I don't remember if it was Martino or if it was Will Salmon, it was one of the things I read where they said that Stearns looks at the lineup, looks at the roster as a living document that is always evolving. So whatever the Mets go into in their lineup or in their rotation on opening day is not going to be how they finished. We already saw that in 1 year. He's always building. He's always looking. He's always trying to improve. So really this question becomes your thoughts on something like, man, if the Mets don't get Pete, where do they go in terms of first base versus where they could potentially go around the deadline if things are not working out at first base and they don't have Pete? So your thoughts on that kind of overarching viewpoint of really a lineup or roster always evolving?
I mean, I think we saw a lot of that last year in general when it came to his approach, when it came to pitching, and we saw how he handled things in the bullpen. And it was the biggest thing that I said I wanted to see from him as a president of baseball ops here. And I said I wouldn't grade him until it got to that point because I want to see if this guy's going to be willing to eat his mistakes. If something doesn't work, is he willing to pivot? Or is he going to be stubborn and say, no, this is going to work, it's going to work, it's going to work. It's my decision. It's going to work. Like, we've seen things like that. So I definitely think that the question being asked of players available at the deadline better than what's available now, like you said, it's ever evolving and it's possible. But when I look at some teams already and at where I think some teams might end up, yeah, I think that there are going to be options in areas for this team to get better in spots that they need help. We think that the idea of Siri and Taylor can work from a defensive perspective in center, and maybe Drew Gilbert factors into that as well. But guess what? Maybe it doesn't work. And then the deadline rolls around and Luis Robert is healthy and he's thriving and the Sox stink and they want to sell. That's a spot where maybe that's a fit. That's someone that you could attack. Pitching is always going to be a question. If the things don't work and he wants to pivot, we've mentioned, what about the likes of Dylan Cease? We've been hearing nonstop about Luis Castillo. We've been hearing about the other guys in Seattle as well. I don't think they'll move them, but Castillo's the one guy. There are a litany of
one of the
players.
Guys from Arizona.
It could be a Zach Gallen. Like there are different ways that this team could improve, and I do think that when the deadline rolls around, Vlad Guerrero, Bo Bichette, like there's going to be guys that are going to be available across the league that maybe you know of or even that you don't know of right now because things just go south. They thought they were going to be better than what they were. So I do think that while the players right now are good that are available, I do think that come the deadline, you're going to see a higher end return for said players, even in potentially shortened seasons because they might be on a 1-year deal. but because of the age factor. I think the age of players that will be available at the deadline is going to be younger than what is available right now. And I think that's what's going to pull people a lot more to going in that direction. And also why I think some teams are holding off to say, we'll cut corners a little bit now. Let's see what we have. We like what we have. Let's compete. And then we will push and make that move at the deadline.
Yeah. And the only thing I'll really add to that is when you look at the landscape of some of these teams and what they've already done in the offseason, I know that the Mets are an unfinished product. We opened the show talking about how the Mets still have question marks and holes, and they need to address them because you can't kick 2025, say, yeah, you know, I know we made it to the NLCS and I know we signed Soto, but whatever. The Mets still went out, Ibby, in this offseason, and they got the best free agent of the offseason. They got him away from the Yankees. They added him to their team for the next 15 years as a 26-year-old star. So I'm not saying, oh my God, you have to sit here and you have to give them praise nonstop and there's not more work to be done. I'm not saying that. I'm just saying when you look around the league and how teams haven't spent and how teams won't spend and how teams just refuse to build teams and refuse to be all in and owners cry poverty, the Mets are in a good place. Mets are going to be good. The Mets are going to be very good. And if the Mets need something, Stearns will go get it. Cohen will give his blessing. So it's kind of the thought process of, yes, you want more. Yes, you want to be as good as you can be. Yes, you want to build towards the future. Yes, you want to have a great team, but also appreciate what you do have, because there are teams, like 5 of them, that have spent $0 in free agency this year, and the Mets have spent almost $1 billion. So I think you have to acknowledge that if you're just being fair. I do. And I know you want more and you need more.
No, of course. And I'm going to answer Carl's question real quick, bringing it up right here, saying how, but guys, why should we go into the season thinking about moves to the deadline? Not saying you're wrong, Ibby, but isn't that a bit irresponsible after signing Soto to that deal? I wasn't necessarily talking from the Met perspective wholeheartedly. I was talking about everyone in general when it comes to the deadline. But I also think that when it comes to David Stearns, I think that he is set in his ways almost of saying, similar to what we heard last year, it's like, we believe that we are a playoff team. And a lot of us sat here saying, really? Are you sure? A lot of people sat there and said, really? You think that this team, this transition here, they're like, this isn't enough. This isn't good enough. And it proved to be 2 games short of the World Series. So I do think that there is trust on his end where look, they're still going to make more moves right now. But the main thing I'm trying to get across is I wouldn't be shocked if there is hesitation to give X amount of years to certain players that are still out there, that being Pete even. I think that's why they're very apprehensive to go beyond 3 years. Maybe that's the same thing if they were involved with Bregman, same thing with Santander. Like, they don't want to go beyond certain areas because they're saying, look, we think that of the players we have, we could get similar production. We can go here instead, get that, and then attack something later on. I think that is a thought in the head. And like I said before, I try my best to think from that perspective because it also, lessens my anger, if you will, because I'm thinking from their perspective as opposed to mine wholeheartedly as a fan.
Yeah, I think that's a fair point. We're over 2 hours. That's about how long this show is run here in the offseason because there's been a lot of stuff to talk about. And honestly, we've had such great interaction from everybody in the comments over the last several months that it's hard to not that we ever try to ignore them, but it's hard to ignore any comments. Things come in, they're let's talk about this. I didn't expect this, whatever. So Ibby, anything you want to add before we get out of here?
Nothing in particular when it comes to our Mets. Hopefully we get some more news by the time we record next week. Shout out to the 475 plus that joined us overall between both X or Twitter and YouTube. Shout out to the 20 brand new subs. We are now at 1,202 total subscribers. So shout out to all of you. Our march towards 1,300 starts now. So hopefully we can keep the groove going when it comes to 20 plus subs in a given show. It's been awesome. You guys have been great. We've already got over 1,200 views on the episode so far. So you guys have been awesome. We appreciate you so much. And I can only say thank you so many times, but thank you. And of course, the chat was awesome today. And I look forward to chatting with you guys about our New York Mets next week.
Well said. Aunt Rivera saying, great show, fellas. Me and Lil Subway to Shea enjoyed his first TMDP. I did not realize that.
Hey, did you post anything? That's why you've been silent the last couple of days. Oh my God.
Been quiet because his wife was doing all the work, having a baby, and he didn't tell nobody. Congratulations.
Congratulations, brother. That is awesome.
To Aunt and his family. That's amazing.
That is awesome.
And I'm happy that we're one of the first things that Lil Subway Shay gets to hear. Thank you, Andre, for not only saying great show. A lot of people are saying that. We appreciate that, but stay safe. I will do my best and feel better. I will do my best. Lots of crazy stuff happening right now. But I think we're gonna be okay. I think I'm gonna be able to stay here and be here, and just got to deal with a little bit of the pain. And yeah, got to give people their flowers. Congrats, Aunt. Congrats, Aunt. Congrats, Aunt. Carlos Ramos saying, great show, guys. Missed it. Glad to be back. Glad to have you back. That's it. I guess we'll get out of here on that note. It was a lot of fun. It's always a lot of fun talking New York Mets baseball with you and everybody in the chat. So if you missed anything, you can go back as soon as we're done, watch the entire episode on our YouTube channel, which is called Til Mets Do Us Part. That's where a lot of you are watching us here today. Don't forget to subscribe and turn notifications on so you never, ever, ever miss an opportunity to join the live show. This will also drop as an audio podcast probably by tomorrow on Apple, Spotify, Google, Amazon, all of those places and more. So subscribe there so you can take us with you in your pocket on your way to school, work, at the gym, on a walk, wherever you're going. Take us with you. Til Mets Do Us Part, all courtesy of the Brella Sports Network. John Saponaro, Matt Ibanez. We will see you next week.